Alrighty guys, time for chapter 9, in which Anna thinks she's a misfit and more sex happens. Yay! So she wakes up the next morning and decides that she's gonna cook breakfast for the two of them. So she changes into Christian's shirt and she changes into his shirt, grabs her iPod, puts her hair in into two ponytails, thinking she'd be safer that way if she looked more like a kid, which obviously doesn't happen. And so she grabs her iPod and begins to strut around the kitchen as she begins to make bacon and eggs and whatnot. And so she starts listening to this singer called Amy Studd, and I didn't know who the hell that was. So I looked it up, and it's this like really obscure British songwriter from like the early 2000s. It's kind of like a mix between Hilary Duff and Avril Lavigne. It's just kind of like this really bubblegum pop sort of sound to it. And it's just really bizarre because this book constantly reminds you that this is written by an English woman, pretending that these characters are American, but there's so much like British weird anachronism kind of stuff in it that it's just like, what? So it doesn't make any sense that she's listening to this British singer. Like, I would have much preferred if it was like Avril Lavigne or Evanescence or Simple Plan, because apparently she's listening to this song about misfits, and she says, this song used to mean so much to me because I am a misfit. And it's like, what the fuck? No, you're not. Like, shut up. Shut up. You are not a misfit. And then she says, I've never fitted in anywhere, and now I have an indecent proposal to consider from King Misfit himself. Why is he this way? Nature or nurture? It's so alien to anything I know, and it just reminds me that I hate this writing so much. So she's listening to her iPod and dancing around, and she turns around and sees Christian Grey, leaning against the breakfast bar, and she just kind of like looks at him, and she like freezes and flushes, whereas if I get caught dancing around, I'd squawk and probably, like, collapse to the ground, which probably sounds even more dramatic and even more stupid if that had happened, but that's pretty much how it goes. I squawk and I freak out, and then I'm like, get the hell out of here. He also apparently has a designer stubble. Alright. They proceed to have breakfast, and they call each other by their last names, which is really awkward and gross, and just stop. He says they need to continue basic training. Ugh, I hate everything. He takes a bite of her food and says, this is delicious, incidentally. And it's just like, really? I'm trying to get through this chapter as quickly as possible because there's a lot to cover. Like, lots of little specific things that really irked me. She also bites her lip a lot in this chapter, which is hella stupid. So, lots of lip biting, and him being like, you need to stop biting your lip because it makes me want to fuck you, and it's just like, cool. He then forces her to eat her food because he has a problem with wasted food, because he's a fucking psycho. I too have problems with wasted food, but I'm not gonna force someone to eat it. If anything, I'll eat it myself, because I'm a fat ass. But yeah. Let's see. Just a lot of really weird writing, like, E.L. James uses phrases like, that is going to be one difficult square to circle. Or something like, you can definitely hear like the British in Anna's narrative. Like, she's speaking about Kate finding out about what's going on, and she says, Kate'll freak out, and rightly so. Just stuff like that. Moving on to the more interesting sexual stuff. They decide to take a bath together. More use of last names, which makes me gag violently. More chewing of the lip. So Anna steps in the bath after Grey tells her to, and then after she steps into it with the water filling up, he then proceeds to take the iPod out of the breast pocket of his shirt, and he's like, water and iPods, never a clever combination. It's like, no shit, Sherlock, you should have taken it out. You should have undressed her before she got in the bath, because if that shit dropped in the water... Then again, he's rich enough to buy her a new one, so I guess it doesn't really matter, but he's just trying to be clever, and it's not working for me. So they get in together, and he's just being kind of a creep a creep to me anyway, and starts feeling her up, and she's enjoying it, and she starts panting as he's touching her, and then he just starts whispering shit in her ear, like, feel it, baby, feel it for me, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Then I totally lost it in this chapter, because he then, like, he stops washing her, and he says, turn around, I need to be washed too, and then he grabs at himself, grabs his penis, and says, I want you to become well acquainted, on first name terms, if you will, with my favorite and most cherished part of my body. I'm very attached to this. And it just made me laugh so hard, because it sounds so juvenile and so stupid. For me, anyway. I hate, when people talk about, when guys talk about body parts like that, being like, oh, I want you to meet my best friend, or my favorite part of my body, and get on first name basis with this. It's just like, it's so juvenile, and a lot of this book is really juvenile, and it makes me really angry. It's just so horribly unrealistic, and it's just really sickening, and the more I read this book, the more I want to stop reading it, because it's just so agonizing, and it rubs me in the wrong way, even though that's an innuendo. It makes me feel really weird and really gross. And not in like a good way, like, oh, when I read this it actually does turn me on and I'm just lying to you. It's just like, it's really creepy the way it's written, and just, it makes my skin crawl because of the way he speaks to her and things like that, and you get to see it more towards the end of the chapter. And just the way she's written is so horribly unrealistic. So she starts jerking him off with like the soap in her hand, and then after she's done that, after there's a coating of soap on his dick, she then begins to suck him off, which is really gross, because there's soap all over him, and it's obviously not gonna taste good. Like, why would you do that? Like, wouldn't you have done it the other way? But apparently not. And so, of course, she's like this master giving head person, and she's like telling herself, I can do this. I can fuck him with my mouth. And it just reminds me of the little engine, that kid, and it's just like, no, stop, please. And then she says stuff like, she's like, I push him in deeper, and I'm like, shut the fuck up. And then he's like, Jesus, how far can you go? And I'm just like, oh my god, I'm gonna fucking gag. And it also reminds me of Limbo, like, how low can you go? She also states, which is possibly one of the best quotes of the chapter, he's my very own Christian Grey flavored popsicle. Oh, it's so stupid. And then he warns her that I'm gonna come in your mouth, and she's like, I don't give a shit, I'm gonna keep sucking anyway. And then the warm, salty liquid oozes down her throat, and she swallows quickly, whatever. And it's just, it also angers me because she knows how to expertly suck him off on the first try. This is the first guy she's ever sexually fantasized about. Like, how the fuck would you even know? Fucking stop it. I hate this. I hate this so much. Like, this whole idea of, like, she's this, like, angelic sort of being because she's never been, like, touched. She's never been corrupted. And yet she knows how it works. She's just, like, an expert at this stuff without ever having to look it up, without ever having to experience it. And it's just not realistic. And it makes me feel really awful about society as a person, because, like, society expects women to be, like, all pure and chaste and everything, but then as soon as they get in the bed, they're supposed to be, like, this raunchy sex animal that knows all of the secrets and all of, like, and it doesn't help, like, add to our society's problem, like, with teenage girls and the way they think about sexuality and whatnot, and, like, being pressured into stuff. And that it comes into play in this chapter, is Christian Grey pressuring her about shit, and it bothers me because, okay, let me get to the rest of this, and then I will continue rambling on about it. So, like right here, well, okay, it's right here anyway. So he says, say yes, he whispers fervently, and I frown, not understanding, and he says, to what? Yes, to our arrangement, to being mine, please, Anastasia. And he's just, like, pressuring her, and it really bothers me, because I remember being pressured into, like, the sort of stuff, like being pressured into sex, and I didn't want it at all. Like, the more I got pressured, like, people nagging me about it, the more pissed off I got. Like, I just wanted to be left alone, and then that ultimately, abolished one of the relationships I had, because the guy wouldn't leave me alone about it, and I was like, no, you need to stop it, you need to stop talking to me about this, because I'm not gonna do it, and he didn't, and I'm like, okay, fuck you, not gonna happen, and we broke up. So yeah. They then proceed to have sex outside of the tub. He ties her up with a silver gray silk woven tie. How appropriate. She starts feeling like she's going to orgasm again from him biting and sucking her toes. She then becomes mortified and embarrassed that he's going to go down on her. Of all things that she's flustered about and embarrassed and, like, nervous about is him going down on her, and I'm just like, what? To me, it doesn't make any sense. Because everything else, she's just kind of like, woo, this is really easy, I don't give a shit. And then this happens, and she's like, oh my god, don't touch me. She can't watch him. He tugs at her pubic hair, because apparently that's a great idea. She convulses again. I laughed again. She also has a quick orgasm. Big shocker in this book, because it always happens, like, really fucking fast. It's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. More fabulous quotes, like Christian says, thank fuck, which is possibly one of the best things I've ever heard. And then, after she orgasms, she says, I know in that moment I would do anything for this man. And I'm just like, shoot me in the face. Then he begins to pressure her again, saying, see how good we are together? And I'm just like, fuck, I don't like the sound of this. And then he says, if you give yourself to me, it would be so much better. Trust me, Anastasia. I can take you places you don't even know exist. And it's like, are you motherfucking serious? Shut the hell up. And then, so they're, like, lying there or whatever, and then they hear voices out in the hall. But if he's still in bed, then he must be ill. He's never in bed at this time. Christian never sleeps in. Mrs. Gray, please. Taylor, you can't keep me from my son. Mrs. Gray, he's not alone. What do you mean he's not alone? He has someone with him. Oh. And then they begin to freak out because it's his mom! His mom's in the house! And they're naked on the bed. And it's hysterical because I'm just like, you can't be motherfucking serious. This is the most juvenile thing ever. What? Are they like 15 years old? Are they 16 years old in his house? No. He is like 28 and his mom is barging in his house and it's just like, oh my god, what? Though I have to admit, it's not a bad ending to the chapter because it's just so unbelievable. You're just like, you can't be serious. And it makes you kind of want to read the next one. So I kind of want to read the next chapter. But at the same time, I'm really kind of done with this book. Also, I came home from work today, and my sister looked at me, and she said, hey, guess what book I started reading today? And I'm like, oh, what? And I was really hoping she would say, like, Game of Thrones, because that's a good book. And then she's like, oh, I'm reading 50 Shades of Grey. I'm almost to the point where you're at. And I'm like, oh, shit. And she's like, yeah, it's actually really addicting. And I'm just like, no! But then again, this is coming from a kid who read New Moon, the sequel to the Twilight book, 16 times in a row. So that's not saying much. But I had high hopes. But that's the end of chapter 9. And I'm really still hating this book. And I can't wait for it to be over. And I still have like 15 more chapters to go. And I'm just like, I don't want to read any more of this. I really don't. But I gotta. So...